welcome listeners to another episode of the SDSU podcast, the live edition of a season
live, baby.
We haven't done a lot of these live episodes. I had to kind of refresh my memory on how the platform works. So bear with us if we have any technical difficulties.
No, I just show up. I mean, I think I've said this a bunch of times. I just show up and ramble and hopefully sound a little coherent, and then Andre just does the rest. So it's actually a pretty good deal for me. We were going to record this anyway. I mean, and I think it's either going to be like 3 days in a row or 3 and 4 days where we're going to get a bunch of episodes, man, in anticipation of the season. And so this is great. I mean, this is excellent. Yeah, playing with all your buttons, huh?
Yeah, playing around with some stuff.
I like it. All right, so I'm gonna jump right in.
Well, you want to tell them who you are in case they don't know?
Oh, beg your pardon. So my name is Paul Garrison. I'm a writer, East Village Times. We have a great team, and I'm just one of the cogs. And we do this thing, and we're basically, a very small local media group, and we want to be able to provide great coverage for San Diego State. Other people for the East Village Times does other sports. Andre and I focus on this. We've been partnering together. This is your 4th season. Mine's my 5th.
Yeah.
Johnny Oliveri, he is going to be writing, has been writing. This is his 1st season. Super excited. Don DeMars, PJ Payne-Bianco, Justin Mojica. I mean, we got stuff going, man, stuff planned. So we're just excited. Tons of work on the Aztecs, tons of things, man. Had tons of interviews, and I'm ready to see them play some football.
Yeah, the anticipation is different. I think you said this is my 4th year, this is your 5th year. It's very different because it's such a shift in what we're used to. Like the Rocky Long and Brady Hoke era is over. New players, new coaches are in town, new ways that press conferences are done, and just different. Everything is just different, right? And I think after the season that the Aztecs had last year, of first losing season in I think 15 years, no bowl game, the vibe around the team and the fan base was very down. And if things had stayed the same, I think it would have compounded. And I think now with Sean Lewis here, Aztec Fast, however you want to describe it, but the Aztec Fast seems to be the number one way to describe it. So we're going to use that. There is the anticipation and a buzz that probably wouldn't have been there otherwise. And I'm excited to finally get to watch a game and see the Sean Lewis era unfold in game, because, it's been about 10 months since he was hired, and, a lot of talk, a lot of action on practice fields and scrimmages, but not once a game starts is when the true test is going to come.
Could have said it better. I mean, that is absolutely where I'm at. I think the interesting part about, doing this for so many years, somebody who was a true freshman in 2020, right? They would be, if they redshirted, they would be in their senior year. And so there is this familiarity with about half the roster where, many of them we talked to as recruits before they got onto the Mesa and did articles on them. And now they're going to be graduating, or they're, close to their answer, right? Like thinking about a guy like Ryan Wintermeyer, right? He is somebody who, that was one of your first articles that you did, and now his career is ending. And so we have so much familiarity with Ryan, and conversations over the years and things of that nature. But then there's like this other part of the team that we don't really know. And I think the hardest part about a show like this, I mean, in all sincerity, we could just go and say, hey, you guys, we saw 2 scrimmages, and we saw some special teams. We saw them stretch, and we've talked to a bunch of people. But what to expect on Saturday, we have ideas, but they're just that. They're just ideas. And I think that moving from we could just call it and we just say, hey guys, we don't really know. We're all going to see on Saturday along with everybody else. And that is the full truth. So I guess the caveat is, we're going off of little information, and so everything is almost like in a format and is a question, but I'm excited to just get to fully understand who some of these players are. and how they play?
Yeah, well, why don't we start with quarterback, the most important position on the team?
Yeah.
We talked a lot since the spring about the competition. I think it started as a 4-man competition. We thought it was maybe down to a 2-man competition with how the depth chart was listing, Danny O'Neal and AJ Duffy as oars. Javance Johnson made his way into the competition at some point in fall camp. Kyle Crum was still there, but Coach Johnson said, it's still open for all 4 of those guys.
Right.
And then we end up with Danny O'Neal, the true freshman, getting the spot. A, were you surprised at that point? And B, how do you think that Danny O'Neal can and will do starting on Saturday?
No, I don't feel like I was surprised. One of the things that I did to try to like get to know the staff is they offered a fantastic event. Evening. What's up, Big Mountain Podcast? They offered a coaches clinic, and it's an annual event that they put on. It was really great. If there are any coaches out there, they had adult beverages, big old spread of food. But it was just a great networking, all this kind of stuff. And I went with the intention of trying just to understand, the offense and try to figure it out, and not just the offense, but anything I could gather. So I went into the offensive ones. I didn't go to the defensive ones. You were engaged that night. Otherwise, we would have split it up. We had talked about doing that. And in that, they showed 2 plays that I saw both of them in the scrimmages. So I don't think it was a coincidence that they had featured some of those plays. And, both of those plays emphasized really deep balls, like not the kind that are like, a 30-yard one, but one where you don't let it go for a little while. You hold on to it as a QB. And I think we had the assumption that AJ Duffy and Danny O'Neal were going to be the guys. And I think with just a little bit that we could see, again, it's a question. And I think this is really huge. I have questions about AJ Duffy's arm strength. You look at his high school stuff and you don't see that many questions, but just watching him throw and at the fan fest stuff, it's a question because I haven't seen him enough to really know. But he didn't seem to me that the 2 plays that they emphasized at that coaches clinic, like that you would feel very comfortable that he could take advantage of all of the options that they laid out. And so then if there were 2, then Danny O'Neal's the other guy, and he was the guy who was there the entire time. And so I think that if you're thinking about this team strategically for this upcoming season, you, me, everyone in the world wants to stop the run game, led by Marquez Cooper, and who's going to be able to take advantage of single coverage on the outside the best. And I think that just with the variety of balls that he can throw, it didn't surprise me. Now, the second question, how does he do? I don't know, man. I mean, we go back to it. I think the most fascinating part of this whole thing is just how poorly he played in front of people. Like sometimes you hear coaches and they'll say things like they'll try to make his game sound a little bit better, but they just have owned it. And they've just said he's a great kid and he's going to handle it the right way. He's going to block out the noise and he's going to go and he's going to be better. So I've been trying to figure out like what maybe they saw that got him to be able to do what they did. I'm going to let you know what I think may have happened, but I want to hear your take. Danny O'Neal, were you surprised? And how do you think his season's going to, what do you think you can make from him?
If we were sitting here 2 weeks ago, I would have said I would have been shocked. But seeing what happened in terms of him taking first team reps 2 practices before FanFest, and then at FanFest being the first quarterback out there, and then continuing that in the next practice, I don't think there was a surprise.
Okay.
I honestly think that he can do really well. I think the fact that they're playing Texas A&M Commerce, I think that could be a good. If they were playing Oregon State week 1, I wonder if the coaching staff makes a different decision. Maybe not. But this is a good way to, no disrespect to Texas A&M Commerce, but there's a reason San Diego State is favored by 34. I think 34 and a half is the last I saw it. So I think it's a good opportunity. Yeah, we saw in the scrimmages that he turned the ball over, and you would think from a young guy, a true freshman, mistakes, turnovers are an issue. But that could be fixed, that could be solved. We don't want to nitpick here and there, but there's plays that could have been made that could have prevented some of the interceptions. But he's a talented guy. There's a reason why he was highly recruited, why Colorado went after him to potentially be the heir apparent to Shadur Sanders. So the talent is there. I also like what Javance Johnson did in fall camp. I would like to see some of him as well. And we don't know how the season's going to play out, but there's no way that Daniel O'Neal is going to take every snap this year. Things are going to happen that is going to necessitate someone else taking a snap. So I think Sean Lewis has to be feeling pretty good about it anyway. But yeah, I wonder if it was any different depending on the opponent for week 1.
Yeah, and again, I don't know about that part of it. I do think it situates itself well for him. And again, it's no disrespect. Texas A&M Commerce, those guys are working just as hard as everybody else in the world. And, you expect them to be improved as they're trying to figure all that stuff out. But 34 and a half points is there for a reason. I think San Diego State should be able to run the football and win. So I've been trying to think about like why it was that he could have like as poor of a performance, especially in comparison to Javance Tubuadu Johnson, because like, what that would mean and what that would look like. And here's kind of what I've kind of landed on. I haven't had a chance to ask any of the staff about this. This is just my pure speculation. Every play that Javance made, most of them that Javance played, I think there's a good exception would be there was a pass to Mikey Welsh over the middle that was fit in just beautifully. I think that was in the flow of the offense. But I think almost every other play happened when he was ad-libbing a little bit, where he was rolling out, he was holding the ball a little bit longer. And I think because the defense knows the offense so well, the quick reads that that the staff wants their QBs to do, like Johnson didn't show that he was doing that any more than O'Neal was. And so I think that maybe that familiarity made it. And I think what they want from their QB is someone who they call them rules, right? Johnny, he wrote about it in his article, but for the preview, there are rules that they have in their offense where if this safety goes over here and this safety goes over there, or this linebacker does this, then the balls goes here. And there's certain rules. All rules are made to be broken, but at the same time, they're made for the team's success. And I think Danny O'Neal does a better job at following those rules. And the fact that they led to interceptions is because I think the defense knows those rules too, because they play against each other every day in camp. And they were maybe the correct throws given the things that were there, but the defense was able to do stuff. Now, that said, there's questions that Danny O'Neal is going to have to answer. Clearly, he was way better in practice than he was than everybody else because the scrimmages didn't matter in the final decision. But there's going to be questions that he's going to have answered, and he's going to have to figure it out. I think Coach Lewis has said that the way forward is for O'Neal to treat practice, is for him to treat practice like the games.
Yeah,
that's to me. That would be amazing for a human being to be able to do that. Most humans, we react to our environment differently depending on where we're at. And I think it takes a real exceptional person to be able to, have 30,000 people in the stands in a game-like environment and make that exactly like practice where nobody's watching. Like, it's easy to say that, but if that's the goal, like that would be amazing. But, and I know where he's going with it. But that's a tall task. And, if he can't figure out how to bring what he's been doing in practice into the game on Saturday. I think it'll be interesting to see how long they stick with him. And I think that they said he's going to be the guy. And John and Jim, Matt Johnson, a great interview. Yeah, Kevin, I think everybody would. Yeah, I know.
I was going to comment on that, but Kevin beat me to the punch.
I haven't seen it. I don't know. I haven't looked where it's at, but
not 30,000,
not 30,000, 25 even. I mean, whatever. I mean, big walk-up crowd. It's just a big difference, right? And so like until he shows that he can have the same maturity, moxie, be that guy, I think he's there. It's interesting, Kevin. Can you put the other one from Kevin? I know no one's saying any disrespect to Moose. I think that if Moose was on this team, I think that he would be perfect for it. He does not have the same deep ball, so I guess that would be the caveat. But you got to remember, they didn't run the ball very much. He was the team's leading rusher last year and the team's leading passer. He basically carried the entire load offensively last year. He was not going to be that guy. And if they have the running game this year that's expected, these quarterbacks can flourish. But I think Maiden was, you look at it statistically, look at the year that he had where they took him to a bowl his first year when he came back from safety. It was a really good year. And yeah, they needed more from Maiden, but 100%. But that remains to be seen how many turnovers these guys have. But you're 100% right, Kevin, that he did have a lot of turnovers. But I think that assuming it'll be an easy step up from these guys is a pretty high bar, because I don't think Maiden was quite as bad as maybe people think about him. Especially, like I said, he didn't have very much help around him, unfortunately.
That is true. I would say the first 6 games Maiden started in 2022. I think that was legendary what he did. Mm-hmm. And we talked about it.
Yeah.
But I think towards the end of that season and then last season, I think, yeah, you're right. There wasn't a lot of help around him. Struggles in the running game. I think last year's team probably started off at a disservice, not going and getting another quarterback in the competition with Maiden.
Yeah.
Instead of handing the position to him. And I think that's where maybe the coaching staff went wrong at the start of that season. And I'm not so sure Maiden is a perfect fit or a great fit for this offense. But he's a gamer. I mean, he made plays with his feet and his arm. I don't know if I would say he would fit well in this offense.
You imagine him in the QB run?
Yeah.
He might rush for 1,000 yards this year in Sean Lewis's offense. At Kent State, the second leading rusher was the quarterback, and he rushed for what?
Colin Lee?
It was another Crum. Not it's the other Crum.
Yeah.
Who's still in the UFL. But I'm just saying, like, he rushed in an offense that wasn't necessarily designed for the QB run. This one is, and he would exemplify all of those things. Anyway, but you're right. I think the deep ball's not there, and the turnovers obviously.
The quick throws, the quick decisions, the quick 3-step drop back and accurate passes. I don't know if that was Maiden's strong suit as well.
Yeah, I agree. But again, I think you go and you put things more spread out and stuff like that. But anyway, the overall point is, I think that Maiden was not quite as bad as maybe people remember him being, and because obviously the season that he was there. Fernando has a good question.
Oh yeah. Well, the truth. Thank you, Fernando, for the question. Thank you everyone for being here. I know some people are trickling in. With true freshman at quarterback, do you lower your expectations for a team? My answer, no. Because I think that all the quarterbacks were going to be young and making their first starts regardless.
Good point.
So to me, I don't think the expectation should be any lower because they weren't super high as it was. I think they're 5.5. The Vegas win-loss is 5.5 over under. I don't think that changes with Danny O'Neal, AJ Duffy, Javance Johnson. I think they'll go over that slightly if I'm making a prediction. Although I think we'll make some predictions later in the show, but
Okay.
I don't necessarily see it as lower expectations. What about you, Paul?
No, I don't. And in fact, I'll even go this way. I think that that this is maybe the highest ceiling pick. I went and I don't think he's the most physically talented of the quarterbacks that are there. But I think with his ability to, when I interviewed him, before he even came to San Diego State, he was very nice. Got on the phone with him and great interview, super mature then, been mature in everything that we've talked to him about, handled questions like he was a veteran, really impressive kid. But he talked about, wanting to see the field like Sean Lewis sees the field, wants to know why Sean Lewis is calling the play. And he's been immersed as Sean Lewis's guy at Colorado. He's been immersed in it for a while, and so I think in a lot of ways, this is the, if Danny O'Neal can do the things that they're talking about in practice, in some regards, it's like you almost want to say like that they're aiming for much higher than the 5.5. And so it'll be interesting to see how we get it. But I agree with Andre. I wouldn't lower the expectations because I think, you're talking about a sophomore who hasn't done a snap, a redshirt freshman, and a true freshman. And I think, I think the same question is going to be out there unless one of these guys has a good year. Why didn't they go get a veteran this year too? And to compete, who had a little bit of time and things like that. So we'll see. But no, I wouldn't do that.
I want to shift gears and talk about Marquez Cooper.
Yeah.
I mean, Keenan Christian came back for a super senior year. Hometown guy. Unfortunately, he had an injury, had surgery. He's going to miss at least half the season. So hopefully we'll get to see him on the field to finish out his career at the end. But I think this was going to be Marquez Cooper's, running back, bell cow that we haven't seen in the last, since Greg Bell in 2021 in terms of, a guy getting 20, 25 carries a game. And I think Marquez Cooper is that person that can do that. And obviously his accolades under Sean Lewis's system already prove that. But I think he's in store for a big year. We have an episode coming out with J.R. Tolver, Aztec for Life, and I think he was talking about how he sees this team running the ball a lot. And, if that's true, then Marquez Cooper, I think, is going to be getting most of those carries and probably a lot of yards. And we only saw 3 carries at FanFest, but they were pretty good. Making people miss in the whole vision, cut back. So I think if any player should draw, really excitement from the fan base, it's definitely Marquez Cooper.
No, and I think that's right. I think it's interesting. I don't think the Mountain West messed up in giving their preseason awards to who they gave it to, because the return there's guys who've returned who had big years in the Mountain West, but none of them had the career that Cooper has had. And I think that this is an offense that fits him really well. I think he understands what's happening. Mike Schmidt in an article that we talked about with that in an article that came out a couple weeks ago, podcast interviews will be coming out this week. You get to hear the whole thing. He gushes about him, and to get Big Mike to gush about a player is kind of hard to do. But he said exactly what you said. He said, "Man, this guy reminds me of the backs we used to have around here, and the backs that they used to have around here are like Donnell Pumphrey and." Adam Moema and Chase Price and, some guys who Aztec fans Rashad Penny. I mean, and so I think that and then what he talked about with them is just his competitiveness, right? Which I think that's maybe, if you want to say, the thing that was most lacking, it felt like maybe from the running backs the last couple of years, it was that competitiveness. Jordan Byrd, I think, had that competitiveness, but just his size was limited inside, and they couldn't always figure out how to get him in space. But I think, you just see that competitiveness with all of those guys. And I'm excited to see what he can do. I agree with you. I thought those 3 carries looked electric. I'm going to be honest. After the first one, I was like, Waterboy, get that guy a guy, and you need to get off the field. Like that guy shouldn't be in harm's way. And like Tano Latui, I thought was really smart as a team captain. He went and really tackled him. And like after the end of a run, but I was at the same time going, gosh, you shouldn't tackle that guy. Like I know why he did, because they're trying to set a tone on the defense. But I was like, just knock him out of bounds. Like this is not the guy that you need to put on the ground. But he'll be chasing record books. Should be very easy. I mean, this first game he might pass 4,000. I think he's that close. Or may need 2 games to do that. But I think he'll be chasing 5,000 yards for his career and see where they are. I think offensively, I think they're going to go as far as Cooper takes them. And I think interestingly enough, I think Jalen Armstead, who is the backup, I think might present with his size difference enough of a contrast that actually complements Cooper a little bit better than Keenan Christian's speed does. And I think Christian, you'd want to see how he can do in space and things of that nature. And I think he's going to be missed. He's going to be missed in the return game. I think, you want him to come back and be healthy. And I think there's great things that he can do. But I think just as far as like a complement, a 1-2 back, I think having somebody who can give a pounding to the defense, I think helps Cooper when he's not in and he's not getting a rest. And I think with Lucky Sutton and then Jalen Armstead, I think their running back situation is pretty good. And I think Kevin is spot on. I think that the system that they run, he knows what it is. It's not faith for him. He came in as a 17-year-old at Kent State, earned the starting job, and did COVID with these coaches, right? I remember talking with him in the summer, and he just talked about how Lewis was always the guy who was the last guy in the office. Like he's always working, always trying to get these guys better. And it was because of that work ethic that he wanted to get back to San Diego State. And obviously he has the respect of the locker room. How do we get up the question about what have you seen that leads him to be a captain from Big Mountain Podcast? Andre, you were just on it, man. Do it. What do you got?
I think we just talked about he's been in the system and has excelled. So he has production. So even though he's brand new to the team, he's got the production and he's got the reputation, maturity. He's a older guy. If you hear him speak, he sounds very eloquent and he's very team oriented. I think his teammates probably gravitated to that. I was listening to he did a post-practice availability today, and I was watching it on YouTube, and talking about being a captain and what an honor that is, and how he needs to make sure to support and help the rest of his teammates. I think all of that stuff jives into it. If Keenan Christian wasn't injured, he was a captain last year. I mean, it's possible Christian could have been voted a captain again, but with his injury, it was probably made it difficult. And then you've got a true freshman quarterback. So what's the next best thing to help out that quarterback is the running back, right? A veteran running back. So I think those are the things that kind of went into that with the team voting him as a captain.
Yeah, and I think, they have that be the alpha mantra, which for those of you who didn't read the article or hasn't done the deep search on Google or whatever, I'm doing a search. It came from Sean Lewis training his dog. And there's this book I think it was written by like monks on how to train dogs, and that he got his hands on. And in it basically says that what a dog does, or what a wolf does from the moment it's born, is everything that it does is geared towards becoming the alpha of its pack. And he said that he saw that and he thought, man, it'd be great if his players could do that. And so that's been his mantra ever since. But it's basically this idea that you get better every single day at whatever you want to get better at, right? And obviously these guys want to be great football players. But I wrote an article on it, but Marquez Cooper going out into the community, just showing up at a high school, taking an Uber over to Helix High School, which is one of the closest one to San Diego State, figuring out how to get a conversation with
Yeah.
with the head coach and just figuring it out. You know what I mean? Like, okay, well, today I'm going to go and I'm going to see if they're at Helix. And then now I did that. Okay. And then I'm going to tell them my story. And then I'm going to connect with, the coach in La Jolla. And then I'm going to, you know what I mean? And he just did all of that. And I think that shows like what they want from their guys. Like, I think Kyle Crum is another guy who's done that, and just, with all the coaching that he's done. And Marquez is trying to he picked his brain on how to do that and things like that. But again, it's that continual improvement, not just in football, but in anything that you want to do. And I think that Cooper has shown that. And then I think just sometimes, man, like, these guys are world-class athletes. And when somebody walks into the room and is good, these guys really respect that. And I think that he's won them over with the quality of play and who he is.
In the interest of time and to keep them moving, if we go on to the passing game, whether it's receivers or tight ends, is there anything that stands out to you and what the Sean Lewis offense can do in terms of making them look good?
Jerry McClure. I'm going to be honest. We had Jerry. We talked to him. Was he on the podcast or was it just a conversation? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, he was on the podcast.
Yeah. So we had Jerry on here. We obviously talked to, one of his high school coaches, two of his high school coaches on the podcast as well. So we got some insight into him. But I thought he was just an impressive player at FanFest. And to see him listed as high on the depth chart, Mekhi Shaw has been hurt. So it would not surprise me to see McClure starting at the upcoming game. Obviously, don't know severity completely of the leg injury that Shaw has. But I think his combination of size and speed, I think, is incredibly potent for this offense. I think they needed somebody who can just strike fear in the defense, and I think he's a guy who can, because he's so big that on just a bubble screen, it's going to be hard to take him down one-on-one. And as a redshirt freshman who only spent one season at UCLA, like, I think that's going to develop over time as he gets more reps. And you're going to have to give him space because he can get over the top of you. I mean, that's what he's always done. And so I think kind of having those like two pieces of it, he's somebody that's exciting. Jordan Napier is somebody who's super exciting. I mean, we have all those kind of things, man. All that stuff I think is really good. And hey, we know what side of the country you're on, man. All good. We appreciate you just coming and saying what's up. Absolutely, dude. So he's somebody who's really excited. Again, big, fast. As your returner, can they get him the ball in space? I mean, Tavion Beasley as a nickel corner, he just stiff-armed him on a short little thing and got upfield really quick. And if the teams are going to be inside to stop Marquez Cooper, they don't have to do a whole bunch. I mean, going back to your point about the quick passing game and things like that, Jayshawn Polk, I think, is a really exciting player. I think he was by far the best wide receiver that we saw in spring camp. And his numbers suggest that he was about to break out, which is why I think West Virginia offered him a scholarship. We'll see what he's able to do, but like, I wouldn't be shocked to see him as like 1,000-yard receiver or getting close to what Ezel Ruffin, I think, was the last Aztec to do that. I think there's a ton, man. Mekhi Shaw, I think he's made for what they're going to be doing, his intelligence. And then Lewis Brown, I mean, I think production-wise, he was great at Colorado State. I don't know what he offers in all sincerity. I just haven't seen enough of him to know what that is. But I've been 15 feet from him, both in pads and in shorts, and that dude is a guy that, like, you go and you say, oh, like when you're walking off the bus, and you're comparing teams, he's one of the guys you bring off first. And so I think it's a lot of exciting. What have you seen?
Well, I think the talent and depth of the wide receiver room from this time last year to now night and day. Like I don't know how you can make as big of a 180-degree flip um, from last year to now, and that's with Napier, Balin Brooks developing, and then Makai Shaw still here, and then all the guys they brought in. There's a lot of playmakers on there. It's just a matter of who can get the one-on-one matchups and who can take advantage. Um, but you could look at the tight ends, Jude Wolf and Mikey Harrison. Mikey Harrison didn't come in until the summer. Jude Wolf was here in the spring. It looks like Jude Wolf is a step ahead because he can do a little bit more blocking, catching. It's interesting. The coaches talk about Jude Wolf as like someone that was highly recruited as a pass catching tight end. And, because of injuries, because of maybe guys in front of him, we never saw that at USC. So a lot of people are just looking at him like, oh, he must just be a blocker. But I think we're going to see him go out and get a lot of targets. And so if he can maintain and hold off Mikey Harrison, he should put up some decent numbers in this offense if given the opportunity. I mean, Mark Redmond was an all-conference player here, but I think he had, 25 catches, 25 catches, a season, which is not that much. But in their offense, it was, a decent amount. But I think Jude Wolf can put up some production that the tight ends have not since Daniel Bellinger went away. And even Bellinger wasn't, breaking records as tight ends because he just wasn't getting the target. So
I was gonna say, it's interesting. I am less interested in watching Jude Wolf than I am in watching Mikey Harrison. He's I mean, he looks like a receiver when he's out there, and I love the competitiveness that he shows. And he had 30 catches himself, but I don't know fully what this offense needs to be able to be successful. I think it was the 7th article that I wrote. It was basically that the tight ends are what makes this go. And I'm really interested to see, and I probably won't see it. I don't think we'll see it until Oregon State, where they'll try it. But how much variety they have in formations and where they're able to go. Again, it's really challenging because I think Mark Redmond was never Daniel Bellinger in terms of the physicality but they really needed him to be incredibly physical. You know what I mean? Like the offense the offense got more physical as opposed to less physical. And they might not need their tight ends to be this physical. However, I do think that, they use them as a fullback. They use them in ways where, like the former, it's from Baylor, which is where this is from, but they'll basically use them as a lead blocker, like right in the middle, as in that midline area. And they need them to be able to run. They need them to be able to finish blockers. But I don't feel like that's been again, the limited time that I've seen guys getting around and getting by Jude Wolf. And so I'm just curious about it, and I think they need him to be all of those things. I think Logan Tanner is sitting there in the wings as somebody who I honestly think has the ability maybe to do both. But he just kind of hasn't figured it out. Paul PH, Paul? I don't know how we pronounce that. It's a good question. Nate Bennett. I did not practices and things like that are in the morning, and you're there for 30 minutes and then you get to go, and so I haven't been to a lot of them, but I did get an opportunity. I will say, Johnny, you're the man. We did have somebody there a lot because people were able to go in and cover it as we do as a team. But I got to talk with Nate Bennett, and really impressive kid. And I think the hard part for Nate Bennett is there's a lot of guys who are similar to what he does. I don't think Nate Bennett's a guy who's going to take the top off of things. I don't think he's a guy who's more that possession guy. The question is how many do you have on the field at the same time? He's a veteran. I think while Makai Shaw is out, I think he becomes kind of that tight end-esque kind of receiver who just is there as that security blanket. He's big, doesn't have a tremendous amount of speed, doesn't have bad speed. I again, same thing. I'm not 100% sure, but you're not seeing him on those deep routes that you would see Brown on and things like that. But I think, he gave impressive answers about how he approaches his game, takes it after Lanier Sampson, about, just copying his coach's energy. I think that as he's moving up from FCS, I think it was Portland State, and now he is at San Diego State. I think he's wanting to get to that next level. And so we'll see what he has. He had some drops in the Fan Fest. And I think there's really good competition and at the receiver position. I'm not really sure that anyone has just grabbed the position where you're just like, I think Jordan Napier, as somebody who's like really ascended to that position, speaks as much about the fact that the other guys haven't done what they needed to do to really grab that position. And so, I think if you're betting on who is going to start this season and then become consistent, you're always going to bet on a veteran. And so I think that is where Nate Bennett is there. And I would count on him to be one of their more consistent performers. But honestly, this is something we don't know. How many wide receivers are they going to rotate through? We don't know. We don't know Lanier Sampson's personality. And to compare it even to Kent State, where they didn't use a lot of guys, which I did in an article because I'm just giving you the information. That's a different guy who's substituting people, and Sampson could have a completely different philosophy. And come to think of it, it would have been good to look at his past school and see what they did. Dang it. Andre, you're supposed to help me with those kind of research things, man.
I don't have it with me.
I didn't think of it. Until right now. Paul, where were you? I needed that. I should have looked at his former school where he was the passing game coordinator and seen how many different receivers they use, and that might have given me a clue. But so I don't know. That'll be fun to see how many guys get into the rotation. And I think Bennett is like in that second group, who will be seeing time.
I want to talk about the offensive line. I think coming out of spring, pretty solidified to have Braden Bryan at center and Nate Williams at right tackle. So that left, two main questions. One was the health of the two guards.
Right.
Rasul Ugala-Masuli and Miles Morale, who missed spring because of off-season surgeries. And then what was going to happen at left tackle. So I would say at this point, you could pencil Rasul Ugala back in. He's been practicing. He was at FanFest. He scrimmaged. He's listed as a starting right guard. But Miles Morale has been a little bit more unsure. He didn't dress for FanFest. He's listed second in the depth chart, which I think means he's not quite ready. So that's a question mark. And then you've got Christian Jones, who we thought could be the left tackle, starting at left guard. And then Joe Borjan, who's brand new, came in after the spring as an Arizona transfer, is now the left tackle, which is interesting because you've got 2 6'8" guys. Well, Christian Jones, he's listed at 6'9", 6'8" on the route. I don't know what's accurate, but he's tall, pretty clear.
Ryan Silver's 5'4", so I would go with the 6'9".
Yeah. Yeah. So just the fact that you've got 2 6'8" plus guys on the left side of the line is pretty big. And, Christian started the first 5 games last year at left tackle, 5 or 6 games before he gave way to Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon, moved over, and Drew Azzopardi started on the right side. But if Christian Jones can solidify himself as a left guard, and then you can give Miles Morale a little bit more time to recover and get that knee right. But yeah, it's crazy to think that the offensive line, a lot of people considered as a weak point in the last 2 years, and then they had 3 guys leave. Actually 4 if you count Josh Simmons from the year before, to Power 5 teams, Power 4 teams now. And now you're thinking, hey, the offensive line actually as a unit, cohesively, could be better than they were the last 2 years. What do you think?
Well, there's so much, man. I loved, Mike Schmidt was kind of funny because when you're talking to him and he's like, when he talked about every other room on the offense, he gave glowing reviews. But then when he talked about his own room, he's like, well, and in a very like Brady Hoke-esque kind of way. I asked him about Nate Williams, and he just was like, Nate Williams needs to get better. I challenged him to be better, but he did talk a lot about Christian Jones, and he gushed about him, and I think he's responded to what they wanted. I remember it's just the way that we do it, man. We are, again, I told you, man, we're local media, low budget. So we piecemeal things together, and we get the job done however we need to get it done. We're going to compete, and we're going to get what we need to get done. So we go to Hawaii last year, and Don DeMars was unable to make the trip. So that left me as the camera guy. And, I'm going to do the job. I'm going to do the best I possibly can. And, we'll go for it. So I go there and I get to BCD, Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, who's now going to be a starter, I think, at Florida. And I'm taking pictures of him. Like, I'm right next to him with the camera, I'm where I'm supposed to be on the sideline, but it's warm-ups. And I'm like, he's taking reps from left tackle. And I'm like, oh man, there's something. And I text you, but I took this series of pictures, and he got bull rushed and just like blown over on the ground. And I go, this experiment is not going to end well. But I felt really bad because, I'm like, this is the one time I'm just like right next to him, and then he's on his back. But that was when he was taking Christian Jones's spot, right? It was that game against Hawaii. And so just for Christian Jones to be able to fight back, and to be able to keep doing that, we've had Christian Jones on the podcast about the things that he's done. So it's exciting. I have no idea what to make of a 6'9", 6'8" left-hand side of the thing. There's a reason why nobody ever does that.
Yeah.
Like, I said in the article about the offense and the quarterbacks, like, with Danny O'Neil winning the QB job, I asked the question, like, since he's only 6 foot, maybe even generously 6 feet, like, does that end that experiment of having a 6'9", 6'8" guy? And the answer was clearly no, because he's going to be the starter. But like, nobody does this. Nobody has huge guys like that playing guard. And so, like, what does that mean? How does that look? And what will that be? I don't know. But it's definitely something to watch. I think that the overall talent of the room, they underperformed, I think, the last couple of years. And we'll see if the coaching staff matters. I mean, Mike Schmidt could have these guys' numbers in a way that Mike Goff did not. But obviously they saw enough on film to be able to go and offer them, like, spots at other places. And we'll see whether they're there, but they need it to be, especially if they're going to be relying on the run.
Yeah, I'm interested to see. A scheme can help an offensive line just like it can help a quarterback, a running back, wide receiver. So I think there should be more cohesiveness between the scheme and the offensive line and the running backs this year than there were in the last 2 years. So we'll see how that goes there. I want to move on to the defense. I had a chance to talk to coach, defensive coordinator Eric Schmidt recently and get his insight. I put some of his quotes in my article about the defensive preview. The defensive line last year really struggled to stop the run, to generate pass rush. And, with the 4-man line this year, the edges are going to be really big, vital pieces of it. But like the guys up front, I think one of the things that's interesting to note is 3 of the 4 guys listed on the 2 deep are like brand new to the team, like as of the summer. And Tupu Alualu, who's a returning starter, kind of dropped to second at the 3 technique position, which was a surprise to me. I think if there was a surprise on that. So, it's either, is it a case of these guys really shined and were just better than everybody else, or the guys that were already there didn't perform up to level, and that's why these new guys are up to it? I don't know the answer to that. But I'm curious to see. We got some Tuioti, 300 pounds. There's no other 300-pound defensive lineman on the roster. So just size perspective, playing a nose tackle, I think should help him. But I think that's a big wild card on this defense is the big guys up front and what they can do to, take on double teams, open up gaps for the linebackers, open up stunt lanes for the edge guys if that's what they try to do. But we'll see because there's a lot of unknowns there because we haven't seen 3 of these 4 guys play, not just in San Diego State, but like at a FBS level.
I think well said. I think if Fernando had asked the question earlier where he said, if you got a true freshman starting, does that lower your expectations? If you have 3 of the 4 guys who are kind of new to the defensive line, does that lower your expectations? And to me, that answer would be yes. But again, the flip side of it is if you saw the Fan Fest, they ran right at the gut. And listen, there's no secrets. Like Sean Lewis's thing is his offense is known exactly what they're going to do, and if they're going to be able to stop it, that's a different thing. But the recipe for success against it is known, and that is run the football, keep them off the field, milk the clock, and they didn't show any ability to be able to stop it. And so trying to figure that out, Tubualu coming out of spring was playing in the nose tackle. And man, we talked about it. We said, well, this is your best defensive lineman, so maybe that makes sense. But he wasn't a complete fit. The 4-2-5 was, I think, as far as like a full base defense was made famous by TCU. And I am blanking on their coach's name. I can like picture him. What's their coach's name? TCU.
Gary
Patterson. Gary Patterson. Good job. We share one brain, bro. Look at us. Gary Patterson and just in what we do, this is good stuff if you're a football nerd like Andre and I are. There are Gary Patterson's coaching clinics like out there to read and to watch. And so I've been watching them. That's what I did because I'm trying to learn how to cover this better. And one of the things that he said every year we could get one nose tackle, and you got your nose tackle one of 2 ways. Either he was big or he was strong. And I think between Sam Benjamin and the 300-pounder that you named, who I can't pronounce his name, which is terrible. I think they're trying to find out that they're trying to get their one. And I think that's the big question, man. I think Tupualu fits way better at the 3 technique than he does as the nose tackle. I think that's actually pretty exciting. Darian Dalton obviously was not listed there. I don't know if his injuries are not preventing or what that was, as you said in your article. But Wyatt Drager, that's another guy who people have moved in front of him. And so what will that line look like? How will that happen? I don't know. But that to me is the biggest question mark on the season. And if I think I'll put it this way, I think there's more question at defensive tackle and nose tackle specifically, nose tackle, is emphasized there, than there is at quarterback. And the quarterback is a true freshman. I think that's the biggest question on the team. And if one of those guys hits, if Sam Benjamin turns out to be just this guy that everyone expected him to be, and he figures it out, I think they have the ability to do really good. And so I think that I think is what people are looking at. But that defensive line, interior line, that to me is the biggest question on the team. And the way that they switched everybody from FanFest, I'm not sure that they answered any of those questions.
Yeah, I would agree. Let's talk about Trey White. Hometown, East Lake High, team captain. Marquez Cooper we talked about as a captain, but Trey White and Tana Latuli were the other 2 captains. But I think he's a guy that came in as a strong side linebacker, the Sam linebacker in the 3-3-5. Something Caden McDonald, played really well in his, career here. Played, redshirted, played there last year as a backup to Cooper McDonald. But the coach Lewis has really praised him. Coach Schmidt really praised. I asked Coach Schmidt about another player, and he answered and said good things, and then said, "Oh, but really, the one guy at edge that really has shined is Trey White." So he brought him up even without me asking about Trey White. And he's guy that's primed, I think, for a big year. He's got the body, he's got the football IQ. He's now in his third year in the program, and so I think all the staff expect a lot out of him at that rush edge position, kind of flanking Marlon Lewis, who we've talked about a lot and written about on the other side. So that's a guy I look for to be kind of one of the leaders of the defense, obviously.
I agree. I think that is where they're at. I think Trey White is really exciting in the sense that he was a down lineman at Eastlake High School, and then his move to linebacker, to sign linebacker, was like, "Ooh, are you sure?" Like it was always like Dominic Oliver should have been the Sam linebacker, and Trey White should have been the down lineman, just with their frames and stuff like that. And now they're going to be, I think, a really potent 1-2 punch. I think Ezekiel Larry coming over from Yale. I think Jared Batty, without seeing him, just his the fact that he was playing middle linebacker, weak side linebacker, and dropping down might be a year away. Excuse me, but the idea that those two guys can be their rush edges, I think is honestly like pretty exciting. Marlon Lewis has been able to like actually like take snaps and do those things. But that was at an FCS level. Ryan Henderson is super at that part. And so I think it's a really exciting thing. Don's jumping this. We got a Don DeMars question. He's jumping it, man. Why don't you grab that question?
I was gonna save it to later.
Oh, sorry.
But
Give me a quick second.
Yeah, moving on to let's go to line. We'll come back to that question, Don. Special teams will be last. Linebacker Tana Lutuli was named a captain as well. He's a sophomore. Owen Chambliss is I think he's a redshirt freshman because he only played 4 games at Utah last year. But those guys come in and they take the spots away from 2 all-conference performers, Cody Moon, who was an all-conference player at New Mexico 2 years ago, and then Kyle Moretti, who was at Central Michigan, who San Diego State is playing this year at Central Michigan, was an all-MAC selection twice. So I'm really interested to see how the linebackers play because you've got 2 veterans behind you, but the coaching staff definitely feels like the youngsters bring more to the table than the veterans. Everything okay, Paul?
Man, it's one of those things. Padre de Cuatro. I got 4 kids, man, and so like the freaking whirlwind in which, listen, like if you enjoy our work at the East Village Times, like great, I'm super happy. I don't feel like it's like my brain's the way that it is and whatever. But if you do want to like it be like this is cool, I cannot tell you the weird ways in which I get this stuff done, man. So I got some kids who aren't doing what they need to be doing as far as bedtime is concerned. But so I appreciate your grace with it. I would just Fernando's question to me is the money question of the whole thing. I was in San Jose, and
it's not a question; it's a comment.
That's a great point. I'm learning grammar and the English language. 5 years in as a writer, I figure I should be better at this. But his point I think is so smart. We cover them on the road. So we cover San Diego State on the road. And so I was in San Jose and they did. Oh, they did. So I was at San Jose and when you talk to kids, the high schools, the college kids, they don't give you great answers. And some of the questions you leave for the coaches. But I was talking with Cooper McDonald and I was just basically asking, dude, why did you guys not know how to tackle this whole year? I mean, we've talked about it since like the first game, like your head coach has talked about. And they didn't put it on the Go Aztecs didn't put it on the YouTube, but he just basically gave this very awkward, like, I don't know. And it's like, I should have known that was going to be the answer, because obviously if they knew, they would have solved it. And this is the interesting part to me, and Fernando's point there, and is effectively like, this team does not have to be more talented than last year's team. With all of the departures, McDonald being one of them, Zyrus, Fisayu being another one, Malone. I mean, there's so many guys that we can talk about. Ratcliffe. But they don't really, if they just tackle like in a normal way, their defense is going to be better than last year's. I don't know why, but last year's defense couldn't tackle, whatever that was. And I think part of it is what Paul's talking about. A huge part of the 4-2-5 is they're going to, this is TCU's, they're going to trade speed and athleticism for size. And I think that's TCU's, because they used to play bigger on offense, and now with they're spread out, I think it's even more advantageous. So they want speed, athleticism everywhere. And the way that they're going to not allow teams to basically bully them is they want to be able to play with good leverage, which basically just means surrounding the guy and having 3 guys tackling one, as opposed to having a series of one-on-one tackling. And last year, they just didn't play with good leverage. I mean, the whole year, that's what that means. Like, they couldn't bottle the guy up. They couldn't figure that out. And so if they can get back to gang tackling, and there was 11 hats on the ball, but then 11 hats of the ball would basically just like 11 guys would individually go after the guy, as opposed to figuring out how to do that gang tackling that the Aztecs have been known for. And that's 100% true, Paul. I think that was their issue, and they just never could figure it out. And so I think that even if they have a step down in talent, they could have a step up in overall production, simply because they just tackle at a normal rate. And that's why they didn't make a bowl last year. I mean, if you want to go and you want to wrap it up and say, what was the number one cause that San Diego State did not go to a bowl last year, is because they couldn't tackle. They just could not figure out how to get guys on the ground the entire year. And so, like, if that's better, this defense can be better than it was last year, even if all of the starters are in Power 5 conferences, because for whatever reason, as a group, and if it was just those angles, Paul, that you're talking about, they didn't do the gang tackling. They didn't figure out how to play with right leverage. And if they can solve that, they can just be better just for that.
Yeah, one thing we didn't mention in the beginning is, if you look at the depth chart for week 1, 9 out of the 11 positions on defense have an or listed. So in theory, that's 20 guys that they plan on playing extended time for. That which is interesting to see how those snaps are divided up. I think Sean Lewis said the guys listed first in the or will start, but then the rotation will be, determined however it's determined. So I don't know. I don't know how it's going to play out. And also interested to see, like, if there's a third string in any of these positions that's going to play as well. That's not listed on the depth chart.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the secondary. I think the biggest shock I had on this depth chart was shock. Wow. Jelani Whitmore.
Yeah.
Listed as an or with Chris Johnson at left cornerback. That surprised me, but then I went back and remembered looking like, yeah, I think he gave up some plays at scrimmage, but he also made some nice plays. Fantastic. He's a guy that hasn't gotten really a lot of opportunities in prior seasons, but I was surprised to see, Chris Johnson not have an outright starter position at left corner, considering, he's kind of the incumbent and how talented he is. But then you got Bryce Phillips and Bennett Walker on the other side, so more oars. But I don't know. To me, I was surprised to see that. Were you?
I was, and the interview that's going to come out with Coach Barton, he talked about just like what a difference maker Chris Johnson is on special teams, and just when he's out there, he just makes them better. I don't know how much I would look at that or as being, but I don't. I think a cornerback who plays every snap doesn't exist, so he's going to be there anyway. But I think Whitmore is one of the coolest freaking stories as we're trying to write stories. I mean, this is a guy. He played wide receiver too. He
Yeah.
went and did some of that. Has just been trying to do anything, and he's always been able to hang on because he's just a freak athlete. He's tall, he's fast,
Mm-hmm.
he's all those things, and so I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see the other side. As fate would have it, I was coming back from covering a San Diego State game as Bennett Walker was coming on. He was coming into town for his official visit, and again, same sort of thing. I was late. I was boarding Group C because I was slow in making my reservation, and there was one seat on the aisle. I sat down next to Bennett Walker. And I'm like, I didn't know who Bennett Walker was, and I'm like, what are you doing? Start up a conversation. He's like, oh, I'm going on an official visit to San Diego State. And I go, hey, man, I just want you to know who I am because you may not want to say anything around me, like, that sort of thing. And so I've been excited. A local guy who, was a very nice kid that I got to meet randomly on that plane ride. And then you go to practice. That kid's long. He has good length as a cornerback. I think he's really exciting. Phillips, obviously, with what his brother does, you're just always going to pay attention to that. But your article where he just talked about his physicality, I think is really exciting. But man, I gotta say, like, cornerback, like I don't know how to say this, like, cornerback is maybe the only position where you can't have Robins. Everyone's got to be a Batman, and I'm not sure that any of those four that are there are Batmans. I don't know if they're just the moxie kind of guys. And I think like a guy like Noah Tumblin, I think vacillated between being like a dude and being somebody who was just a little bit below. And when you're a little bit below as a cornerback, you get beat deep. When you're a little bit below and you don't have quite that edge, like you're not great. And Des Malone, I think Des Malone took a step back last year. There was just, whether they played him too much and they didn't have enough of a rotation, he couldn't tackle, and he had no excuse. The dude is a physical specimen. And so I thought he took a step back last year. But that's my question is are two of those guys that they can, put 8 guys in the box to go, when they're up in Boise and stop Gentry and say, you are going to beat us, Boise, through the air with your redshirt sophomore quarterback. And that's it. And if you do it, fine, we'll tip our hat to you. But we got dudes out there. We're going to be able to cover you. And I don't know. I just don't know. I haven't seen enough of them to be able to say that. There was the interceptions that were really good with Whitmore. But there was also getting beat over the top by Balin Brooks, Chris Johnson sitting on a route, and Jerry McClure getting over his head. So I think that's a big question. But at the same time, I don't feel like it's what's the right phrase? I don't feel like it's a liability. But I think these guys also still have a lot to prove.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin asks if Malone led the team in tackles. I don't believe so.
I'd have to look.
Yeah, I want to say Darius Barfield might have been up there.
It wasn't Cyrus?
Oh yeah, Zaire CSA.
Okay, I was gonna say, wow.
Yeah. I was trying to remember who the linebackers were.
Yeah.
But yeah. Moving on to safety, I think this is a pretty deep and talented bunch. Eric Butler, who's a guy that we've talked about in previous seasons and previous episodes, is someone that probably deserved more playing time last year, especially as the season was unfolding and the playing, younger guys and giving them more snaps, I think would have been something that could have helped some of these players. But you have William Nemo, who he's battling with, who's a UCLA transfer. And then you've got DeLaShawn Staley, who transferred in as well to go with JD Coffey, came in last year from Texas. Coffey played a few, I think he had 1 or 2 starts at Aztec when Marcus Ratcliffe was out, right? The one question I have is, like, they list the stud as a nickel / former Aztec, but I don't necessarily think the former Aztec played nickel. So, right?
Yeah, I don't
know
know
why they listed that way, but
well, and maybe maybe it's a slide at an article that I wrote that the Aztec is no more. I don't know. But I mean, the other piece of it is all the guys who were Aztecs were not listed at the depth chart at stud, with the exception of Jatavius McGee. So, I'm not really sure what that was. I think when I look at that, there's a couple of things that are interesting to me. I'm really interested in Eric Butler as the free safety. I thought there might be some play for him in the box as the rover safety. Now, he played corner for one of the best high schools in the country. And so I think he has, that ability there, very fast, very physical. And I think, like, his physicality from the free safety position is really exciting because, again, they're playing a 4-2, and they don't have that extra linebacker there. And then if you don't have kind of that bigger Aztec guy, like, having those 2 safeties, but one who can also play free with Eric Butler, I think is really exciting. I personally, until I see it, I have questions about Deshaun McEwen. Deshaun McEwen was good, but I haven't seen him put it together. Great kid. When he committed to San Diego State, got to have a good conversation with him, write an article about it. But for his athletic ability, that dude needs to be just an absolute stud, which I know that's the position that he's there. But I think it's interesting that he's an or with Josh Hunter. And I think that's a big deal. And I think that's just something that needs to be worked out, and we'll see how that works out. I'm really interested to see how they use these guys, how they decide. They talk about the free and the stud sometimes being interchangeable, and so could we see an Eric Butler come up onto the line and be able to use that? I think another wild card in this is a guy like Max Garrison. If Staley, if JD Coffey, if they aren't doing what they need to do in the run game, do they get a guy like Max Garrison who can get downhill? And he looks like a free safety, but could he get downhill as a rover, and be there as a guy who he's one of the few guys, again, amongst that group that we've known for a few years, who really got downfield, who didn't catch, who didn't wait, but like really attacked, which is what you want from that rover strong safety. And so I think it's fascinating. Another, like, who they're going to play and how they're going to, but another aspect that to me is fascinating is, like, how much do they match up with the personnel and the down and distance of the opposition? They obviously in practice don't get to huddle. They don't get to substitute frequently, but, like, let's say it's 3rd and 15. Do you bring Tavion Beasley in as your stud? Do you bring Tavion Beasley in as your stud? And then now you got a true nickel corner who, just in pure coverage wise, is probably your best pure cover nickel guy. And it's 3rd and 15. So why wouldn't you? You know what I mean? And do you go and say, okay, like JD Coffey, he may be more of a coverage guy than Staley is. And so do you bring him in those packages because that gives you more speed on the field and you're not worried about the run? I don't know. I mean, I really don't know how those things can play out and will work. And so I think that to me is really interesting. Just like where do they go? How do they match up? Do they match up? Could Chris Johnson slide inside? I think he has the skill to be able to do it. I got no idea. I mean, I just haven't seen them do anything like that, and we've only seen 2 opportunities. But I think the secondary. I'm going to ask the same question, saying the same comment. Like, I think there's a lot of guys. I think there's a lot of solid Division I players, but who's that guy that just makes you afraid? Who's that Patrick McMorris? Who's that Trenton Thompson? Who's that? We can go through the list of great secondary. Who's the Darren Hall? Who's the Taylor Hawkins? I mean, who are the guys that you're sitting there and you're just like, that guy can beat us. We are going to go away from him and we're going to change everything that we do so that cat doesn't beat us. And who is that guy? And I don't have that answer today. And that's part of the fun part of how this unfolds. But I promise you, he'll be found really soon by opposing offenses. They'll see it, they'll know, and then we'll really be able to see that cat and mouse game, that like adaptation that's going to need to take place as the Aztecs go forward.
Paul asked the question, do you see any true freshmen playing on defense? Relevant to the discussion because I think Jason Mitchell might be one guy.
Yeah.
Who came in highly regarded, is versatile, can play corner, DB, safety. He's listed at safety, but I think he's a guy that, as you talked about, if the guys ahead of him on safety aren't performing or aren't the guy, you could see Jason getting in there. And then, you can look at the 2 corners, Isaiah Buxton and Tayton Byer.
Yes.
Also along the same lines of if those 4 guys aren't, performing well or able to cover or do what they want, you could see, because both Buxton and Byer came in during the spring, so they've got a little leg up on maybe Jason Mitchell in terms of playing earlier because Mitchell didn't come until the summer. But those are 3 guys I would say have a decent shot of playing this year.
I agree. And to your point about Buxton and Byer being ahead of Mitchell, which could be why he moved to safety, right? It is that is what Sumler said at an interview, that Johnny was able to get for us. And he asked that question. And that's what his answer was, is that, hey, these guys were here earlier, and so they're a little bit ahead. But I'm going to go with Cody Cornelius. I still think that their defensive line is not solidified. And until they're proven, that's the spot that I would be going and saying they have to find somebody who can hold a double team so their linebackers can run free. And I like Cody Cornelius. I think Cody Cornelius is the kind of nose tackle that San Diego State has to like scour the country to find. He's not going to go to a Power 5, and the reason he's not going to go to a Power 5 is because he's 6'1", and I haven't sit next to him, so I don't know if that's legit, but he's not 6'3". If he's 6'3", he has Power 5 offers. The dude is he's strong at the point of attack. And obviously he's not strong as a true freshman as he's going to be, in a couple of years. But if they don't find somebody, he's got to be somebody that you're going to have to roll out there and try to see. Jason Mitchell, I like that call. I loved his physicality during FanFest. I thought he was one of the best tacklers, but it was always on the outside. And I think if you're sitting there going, who helps us? I think it's a guy, if you get that same physicality, but inside of the box, he might be a guy at that rover safety, even though he can cover. And you might be able to move Butler down to that rover safely and put a guy in your free safety as Mitchell. So I think there's a lot there to like with his physicality. And so I would definitely go with those guys.
All right, we've come to special teams. We can finally get to Don. Don DeMars, our great photographer at the East Village Times, says the Aztecs have had 2 prior very physical and very good punters in Ariza and Browning. This year's team has Tyler Paschula at 6'3", 220. thoughts on his role and any chance we see him fake a punt and run. You talked to Coach Barton about it, so maybe you can take that one first.
Absolutely. Yes, Don. I think that you just first of all, Don is the GOAT. If you haven't listened to the Father's Day episode, you need to. Don is a great friend of mine, and Andres as well. And I couldn't. I mean, I would not want to do what we're doing with these Village Times without Don. I can never say too many good things about Don, but I think Don is there, bro. I really do. Talking to Coach Barton, he talked about, that Tyler is going to run out, and he's going to be running out, and he's going to be kicking to both sides of the field and kind of those squibs and things. And that is the perfect recipe for him to look up and be like, hey, nobody rushed me. I'm going to tuck and I'm going to go. The other thing is I wouldn't underestimate Tyler's athleticism. There's not a lot of Albany punting that you're going to be able to find. He transferred from Albany. However, and this is from memory. I'm not looking it up, but I believe there's a game where the University of Albany played Villanova, and that full game is online. Andre, you'll like this. In that game, I was interviewing Tyler on the field after one of the practices, and I asked him about something related to fakes or something. And he talked about that he did a 50-yard pass in the air on a fake 1 year. One. And so I looked it up, and that game is on there. And you, if anybody wants to do it, you can watch Tyler throw a 50-yard interception. And he's right. The receiver didn't make a real play on the ball. But that's already part of his repertoire. And I guarantee you, Texas A&M Commerce knows it because I wrote about it in an article. And I think that's part of it. Yes. I think that just like Doug Deacon, when he was at San Diego State, I think this staff is looking for every advantage they could possibly find, just like every other coaching staff. And if they feel like Tyler can run and they can bring that, I think that's a good idea. Although I would say, in my opinion, in trying to read into the 220 pounds, the idea that he could fall forward and kind of like knock guys over and get that first down. I'd say if you're close enough where that matters to the first down, you might want to give the ball to Marcus Cooper. But that's just my thought.
Yeah, and we got accustomed to seeing one kicker do all three roles over the last 3 years. So it's going to be different this year. Gabriel Placencia came in and kicked 4 field goals last year when Jack Browning was nursing a slight injury, and he made all 4 out of 4. He's got a pretty good percentage in FBS kicking. He obviously won. Yeah, he can't get much better than that. So he won the competition in the spring over a couple guys, and obviously the competition will always continue. But he's looking to do it, and he's a lefty. He's got a strong leg, but I don't think any of the 4 he made last year were beyond like low 40s.
46 was the longest, if I remember.
46. Well, that's still pretty decent. We'll see. It's consistency, obviously, is what they're going to need. You obviously need to make all the ones inside of 40, and then make a good nice amount of the ones in the 40s, and then obviously anything above 50 is kind of a lower percentage, but you want to make some of those as well. So I think like Placencia obviously has a good track record based on limited sample size last year. But he's going to need to that's the other thing. We don't know how Sean Lewis, what kind of a riverboat gambler he is, right? Like, is he a guy who, if they're at the 40 and it's 4th and 5, he's going to go for it every time, right? Because he has the confidence in his offense that, hey, we can get 5 yards. Whereas Brady Hoke was maybe a little bit less, confident in that, or maybe he played things differently. So we'll have to see that. That's one of the things we'll see as a Sean Lewis head coach at San Diego State, how he plays those game situations. So who knows how many long attempts Placencia will get. But Obviously, kicking and getting 3 points and ending drives with points is a key. And Placencia's got the role right now, and he hopes to hang on to that.
I think it was, and Kevin's making a point here that Tyler Placencia, Pastula has a long of 68, average of 41.8. There are questions all throughout the roster. This is just the way that it goes. The FBS guys who are in the group of 5 go to the Power 5. FCS guys go to the group of 5. That's the general way that it works. And so, like, Marlon Lewis, as much as he's just been a star every single time that we've seen him, he's still an FCS guy who's coming up to the FBS level. Like, let's see what he got, right? Ezekiel Larry's the same way. You can go through the list. The one place that I would expect to at least translate is punting, because you're just kicking the ball, right? Like it shouldn't be, that shouldn't change just because you are at FCS and FBS. And so I think that and to me, the biggest, Kevin, to me, the biggest thing is that, I'm talking to Zach Barton in spring, and I'm saying, like, look, go ahead and like what do we expect from the punters? And he said, look, you're gonna have these punt, like, Pastula is going to be a step down from Browning and from Ariza. And can we pause, Andre? And I just want to say this. Matt Ariza, congratulations. If there's anyone who deserves to be like the kicker in an NFL camp, it's that guy. Everything that transpired and everything and how all of that worked, Matt Ariza didn't do anything. And the fact that, maybe he should have been smarter at a party and all those kinds of things, fine. But the fact that it didn't derail his NFL dream, man, is a freaking cool thing. So hats off to Matt Ariza being able to stick with that and figure that out. And congrats on being able to win the job with, like, the world champions. But anyway, that aside, yes, thank you, Kevin. It's I mean, we all were in the same spot. I mean, we spoke to Matt, a couple weeks before everything broke. Yes. We spoke to Matt, we had him on the podcast a couple weeks, before anybody knew that he was Punt God, it was our articles that was, like, giving him the things, and we had a ton of relationship with him. And so it didn't seem to fit, but everything that went on, and I got thrown under the bus for saying, anything positive about the university or him in that era. And just that everything that played out, ugly situation, feel horrible for, the woman who was involved, etc. I mean, really do. But that came out today that Matt Ariza was the Chiefs kicker, and it's important to acknowledge that with everything that went on as we're talking about the punters. His name was taboo. You know what I mean? And we didn't want to talk about Matt Ariza as a lineage person that these punters have to pay attention to, and Pastula, it needs to, right? And for Barton to say there's NFL guys who've been here before in Jack Browning and Matt Ariza, and Tyler Pastula again, back in spring said there's going to be a step down, and now he's saying, I don't think there's going to be a step down. He's going to match those guys. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. That's a change that, like, being able to see him over those months, that Pastula has filled him with that confidence. And so and we talked about earlier, I'm excited to see the variety of kicks that might be part of that repertoire. At the same time, he said that Pastula is doing all of the, booming NFL kicks where he's turning the ball over and doing all of that stuff. So between Ryan Wintermeyer as the long snapper, punting is, like, honestly the place that I have the least amount of concerns. I think their punting game should be fantastic.
I'm pretty coincident. Like, Fernando asks a really good question. I think with so many unknowns, is there anything that you feel good about? I think you just answered one of them, the punting game.
I don't think that's comforting.
I agree with the punting thing. I think to answer Fernando's question, Marquez Cooper and the running game, I think is something to feel good about. Just based on his track record, not just in college, but with the Sean Lewis offense. I think the wide receiver talent is really something fans should feel good about as well. There's a lot to feel good about, but there's a lot of unknowns too. I think that's what makes it so kind of exciting and interesting to finally get games. Um, Kevin says, I'd say coaching staff. I do. I like what I've seen from Sean Lewis and the staff, but until they play the games, it's hard to accurately, put a measuring stick to that. But yeah, I mean, I think Sean Lewis has brought a different vibe to the program. He's brought some really good coaches with him. Bringing Mike Schmidt back, I think, was a huge boon for the program. Keeping Coach Sumler here was good, and then some of the other guys that have come in, I think, are really going to help overall at their position group. So I'd say, Coach, that's a good one, Kevin. I think that's something to feel good about as well. Anything else, Paul, that we haven't mentioned?
I got to disagree with Kevin. Sorry, man. I love the energy that Coach Lewis has brought in, but we're talking about feeling good before seeing them play, right? And I think the biggest question that has to be answered is, can a defense play good defense that lines up next to Sean Lewis's offense? Like, if you go back to Kent State, there wasn't very many offenses in the country that was better than Kent State. The exception was every single offense that played against Kent State's defense. And you look at, Colorado last year, and they started the world on fire, all those kinds of things, but anybody could score on them. And so I would argue that, like, they're trying to figure out, how do you have a complementary defense to what the offense does? And I think it's a question. So I don't feel good about saying that the defense is going to be able to complement the offense, because it's never been done with Sean Lewis. But I will say the caveat is, when Baylor had a really good defensive line, and that's where the offense comes from. When Baylor had a really good defensive line, they had a good defense a couple of years, but there were some years that they just got blown out of the water. And I think there is something about the tempo of the offense that makes playing defense more challenging. And Coach Lewis has talked about, learning how to win each game as its own unique thing, which might mean playing field position and winning 6-3 sometimes. And so I'm really excited to see, like, how that plays out and how malleable the offense is. But I personally, I feel good about the people who are in the program. I think they're very similar to the people that were in the last staff in terms of their character and in terms of what they value. But I'm not sure if you can play fast and that is the best recipe for success. Because again, you look around college football, and a lot of plays play spread, but not a lot of plays plays incredible tempo. And it might make playing defense really hard, and that might make it impossible to be as effective at winning. So that's a question I have. But as far as answering the question, places that I feel really good at running back. Despite all of the turnover, I actually feel pretty good at offensive line. I think that's a good spot. It's hard for me to feel good at wide receiver just because I don't feel good at quarterback. And obviously, unless we're doing jet sweeps, they're pretty dependent on each other. So I'm going to go those two on offense. Defensively, interesting enough, I feel good at safety. I think that however that's going to play out, it's going to play out in a way that's going to be advantageous to the Aztecs. If the guys who are the starters go and jump the positions, then they're really good because their reserves are good. Flip side, if their reserves step up, their starters are good. So I think they're good. So I think safety is really good. Linebacker, if Kyle Moretti and Cody Moon are your starters, or if Brady Anderson and DJ Herman are your starters, I feel good. Ironically, the guys who beat them because they just haven't played as much together and things like that. I just don't know them. But because they beat guys who do have a lot of, I mean, Moon and Moretti have all conference honors, and these two guys beat them. And as a result of that, I'm also going to say linebackers. I think the Aztecs are 3 deep at linebacker, and I think it would behoove them to figure out how to get more of those guys on the field. And so I think there, Kevin has a spot about last year's versus this year's staff. Yeah, I don't. If anybody wants to go and say that they lost confidence in last year's staff, I think that there's proof that is true. And all I would say is that this year's staff, on and how they work for its total unity, it just remains to be seen. But I think Kevin, I don't think that's a wrong take. I personally wouldn't go there, and I think that both staffs have a lot of strengths for themselves. But I think that's a good take for sure.
All right, we are running late on time here, so final question. Let's make it quick. What's your prediction on wins for the season, Paul?
8. I think they're gonna win 8 games. I think there's been an insane amount of turnover on the teams on their schedule, and I think that they're going to early in the season. I think they're going to win some games that they're going to win because they're going to surprise teams on what they do. I think there's a couple touchdowns against an Oregon State, against Cal, against Central Michigan that I think is going to, the wrinkles they're going to be able to put in that I think are going to be good. And I think that is going to get them a couple wins early. I think they're going to be competitive in the Mountain West. I don't think that they're going to make the championship game. However, I think they're going to win 7 games in the regular season, win their bowl, and they're going to have 8 wins. And everybody is going to be unbelievably excited about 2025. And we're going to be back on here in a year going, yeah, but they don't got Marcus Cooper at running back. What are they going to do?
Transfer portal.
Yeah, we'll see it.
So you flipped it on me. You first said 8, and then later you said it's 7 plus the bowl game.
That's 8. 7 plus 1.
Yeah, that's true. I guess we were looking at it because I was going to say 7, like 7 in the regular, like 7 and 5. Not to, yeah, you're right. So I'm not knowing who they're playing in the bowl game. It's hard to say whether they're going to win that one or not. But I agree with you that 7 and 5 regular season is where I stand as well.
All right, I want to go. You said last question, and you didn't ask me if you could ask if that could be the last question.
Okay.
So I want to jump in there. If I could ask you a last question, could you help me? I want you to go through the schedule, and I want you to tell me wins and losses.
Okay.
All right, Texas A&M Commerce.
Win.
Oregon State.
Loss.
Cal.
Win.
At Cal. Ooh, at Central Michigan.
Win.
Hawaii.
Win.
So you got them at starting 4-1.
Yeah.
Woo! Man, I'm saying, dude, like they are going to be. Our articles are going to be so red, and everyone's going to be just like, this is the greatest thing ever, and they're going to be so let down. All right, so we had our Hawaii at Wyoming.
Loss.
Washington State at home.
Win.
Boise State on the road.
Loss.
New Mexico at home.
Win.
UNLV on the road.
Loss.
Utah State on the road.
Win.
Air Force at home.
I think that would be the 5th loss.
Okay, I was to see if you were counting. All right,
Yeah.
Listen. I see it,
Washington,
man.
Washington State Air Force and Oregon State. Like I said, 2-1, but like that could be, those games could go. Those are the 3 games I think that are going to be the big shift in.
I'm right there with you. I'm right there with you, and I will say, last year, UCLA had a freshman quarterback who played over his head, and they were better than and there were veterans behind him. They had more options, and I think Danny O'Neil plays over his head. I think they can improve on that. The flip side of it is if he doesn't play average, and they're still searching and things like that. I think it's there, but I think you and I are about in the same place. I think I probably would. Kevin, you're the man. Thank you, sir, for hanging out with us, asking all your great questions. That's why we do it. I think Andre and I are very much considering making this a Tuesday thing throughout the season, because why not, right? Talk about the last game, talk about the next game. So we appreciate you, hanging out with us and helping just keep it going. I'm stoked, bro. I'm going to be honest. I am tailgate. We're going to be tailgating. We're going to get there early. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they do, to talking to Coach Lewis after the game, the players. I'm so excited to write an article, not about what I think, but about what I see. There's so much. Yeah, I see, Fernando. That's my feeling. That's exactly my feeling. And they've love it, Kevin. I got that feeling too. And I think, unlike Colorado, I think that Lewis is going to keep the reins on it, obviously, as the head coach. Like, they're not going to demote him. So I think they're going to figure it out. They got 2 bye weeks that come at like good times right before Colorado State. right before Central Michigan, and another one in the conference play. And I think those things will help. It sets up well for them. The turnover that San Diego State has experienced throughout their whole schedule, every team has experienced similar to that. Boise State's the exception. They've had very little turnover, but they lost like their starting quarterback and their best wide receiver. And it's like, what does that mean? So we'll see, man. And I think it's a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to covering it. I'm looking forward to watching it. And I think Aztec fans should be incredibly excited. Yes, click the like button.
Definitely. Click like, subscribe.
Yes, subscribe.
We do a terrible job trying to market the podcast and channel, and we should do a better job. But
we should. I am honestly not okay with Don's comment. Just for the record, as you talk about, he's our great friend. Don is missing the first game because he's going to Europe. So, Don, I don't want to hear you talking about see you at Snapdragon on 9/7. I don't even want to hear that. Have a phenomenal trip. I'm sure we'll text before you go, man. But, dude, you deserve it. You're the man. So enjoy it, man. But we'll see you on 9/7, brother.
Yep. Thank you guys for tuning in, asking questions, putting in comments. We appreciate it. We're going to try to make this a regular thing throughout the season as the schedule permits.
Let's do it, Andre.
Appreciate you guys, and have a good night.